My name doesn't matter. In fact, I'd rather you didn't know who I am. I worked for 8 years as a 911 dispatcher, and what I'm going to tell you now is why I can no longer sleep with the lights off. It was 3 in the morning when it all began. The center was almost empty, just me and 2 other colleagues on the night shift. The silence in that place was always unsettling. It's not an ordinary silence, you know. It's the kind of silence that weighs on your shoulders, that makes you look into the dark corners of the room, hoping to see something that shouldn't be there. Before I continue, I need to ask you 3 questions. These are questions that haunt me every night, that whisper in my mind when I close my eyes. First question, have you ever received a call from someone who has died? Second question, what if the help you sent never came back? Third question, do you believe that evil can use a telephone line? I didn't believe it. I thought they were just stories veterans told to scare newbies. Stories of impossible calls, of voices that shouldn't exist, of calls for help coming from places nowhere on any map. But that October night, everything changed. It wasn't one night. It was 3 nights. 3 calls that intertwined in a way that still makes me question what's real and what's not. 3 stories that, when you understand their connection, make you realize there are things in this world we should never have discovered. And worst of all, these stories aren't over yet. The first call came on a Tuesday, around 3:15 in the morning. The phone rang with that shrill sound that always made me jump in my chair no matter how many times I heard it. I answered following standard protocol, my automated voice saying the words I had repeated thousands of times. On the other end of the line, there was only breathing, heavy, wet, as if the person were running or drowning in air. Then the voice came. It was a man, probably in his 30s. He said he'd rolled his car on Black Valley Road, a stretch known for fatal accidents. The road cut through dense forest, where cell phone reception was virtually non-existent. The fact that he'd managed to call at all was a miracle in itself, or so I thought at the time. I tried to calm him down, asking him to give me his exact location, but he seemed disoriented. He kept saying something was wrong, that it wasn't just the accident. His voice began to falter, cutting out as if the call were being interfered with. Between the broken words, I heard something that chilled my blood. They're watching me. I asked who was watching. He didn't answer my question. Instead, he began to whisper, as if afraid of being overheard. He said there were figures standing among the trees, that they didn't move, just watched. That they had eyes that glowed in the dark, but they weren't animal eyes. They were eyes he swore he'd seen before, somewhere he couldn't remember. I was able to pinpoint a rough location through the connection signal. I immediately dispatched an ambulance along with paramedics Marcus and Elena, an experienced duo who had worked in the area many times. I kept the man on the line, trying to keep him conscious, trying to get him to focus on my voice and not on whatever I was seeing outside. But then something happened that had never happened before in all my years of work. The ambulance's GPS simply disappeared from the system. It wasn't a common glitch, it wasn't the signal that had dropped. The ambulance literally vanished from the map, as if it had ceased to exist. I tried radio contact. Nothing. I tried calling Marcus and Elena's cell phones, straight to voicemail. And the man on the line, his voice had changed. It wasn't panic I heard anymore. It was something worse. It was acceptance, resignation, as if he'd understood something terrible and was making peace with it. His last words before the line went dead were, "Now I remember. I've been here before. We all have." The call dropped. I tried to return the call, but the number appeared as non-existent. I activated the emergency protocol and sent more units to the area. The next few hours were a blur of anxiety and procedures. When the sun rose, search teams found the overturned car exactly where the GPS had initially indicated. It was empty. There was no body. There was no blood beyond small stains on the steering wheel and the broken window. There were no footprints leading from the vehicle. And worst of all, there was no sign of Marcus and Elena's ambulance. They searched every inch of that road miles into the forest. Nothing. 3 days later, when I'd almost convinced myself there was some logical explanation, I was called into the supervisor's office. They had recovered the full recording of the call and wanted me to listen to it again for the official report. I sat there, headphones on, and pressed play. My voice was there, clear, asking the usual questions. The man's voice was there, scared, disoriented. Everything was exactly as I remembered. But then, In the last 30 seconds of the recording, when he said those final words, there was something else. Something I hadn't heard during the live call. In the background, barely audible, there was a third voice. It wasn't human. I can't describe exactly what it sounded like because it's something that doesn't fit into human words. It was like a voice in reverse, speaking in multiple languages at once, and it repeated a single phrase in a loop. Welcome back. The ambulance was never found. Marcus and Elena remain missing to this day, and the man in the overturned car. Database searches showed that no vehicle matching that description had ever been reported stolen or missing. It was as if the car had simply materialized on the road just to make that call. I should have quit that week. You should have understood the warning, but I didn't. I thought it was an isolated incident, one of those inexplicable things that happen and we learn to file away in the darkest corner of our minds. I was wrong. That was just the beginning. 2 weeks passed, 14 sleepless nights, 14 shifts spent staring at the phone, waiting for it to ring, waiting to hear that voice again. But nothing happened. Routine returned to normal. Regular calls, everyday emergencies, lives saved and lives lost within the expected pattern. Then came Friday. Halloween was near, and the town had that eerie energy that comes when the veil between the world of the living and the dead supposedly thins, or so the legends say. The phone rang at 3:22 in the morning. I noticed the time because it was almost the same time as the call from the forest. I answered, expecting to hear an adult, but it was a child, a girl. By the sound of it, she couldn't have been more than 6 or 7. Her voice was so small, so fragile. She said her mother wasn't waking up, that she'd tried to shake her mother, had screamed, but her mother remained motionless in bed. I immediately activated the protocol for emergencies involving minors. My voice became softer, calmer, trying not to scare her further. I asked where she was. She gave me an address, Riverside Building, apartment 313. I knew the building. It was on the east side of the city, an old building but not abandoned. I asked if there was anyone else home, a father, a brother, anyone. She said no, that it was just her and her mother. As I dispatched the ambulance, I continued talking to her, trying to keep her calm. But there was something strange about the way she spoke. Her voice would crack every now and then, not like a crying child but like a scratchy record, like those old vinyl records when the needle skips. I asked her name. There was a long pause. Then she said, Lily. But the way she said it was strange, as if she wasn't sure herself. The ambulance arrived at the building in less than 10 minutes. I listened on the radio as the paramedics entered the building and climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. I stayed on the line with Lily, telling her that help was coming, that everything would be okay. Then I heard one of the paramedics voice over the radio, tense, confused. They were in front of apartment 313, but the door was sealed, not locked, sealed, boarded up, with rusty chains, with a notice from the city dated 2012. The building wasn't abandoned, but that particular apartment was. I asked Lily if she was sure of the apartment number. She said yes, it was 313, and that she was looking at the door at that moment. I asked her to describe what she saw. She described a blue door with a gold number, a welcome mat with floral designs, and a flickering ceiling light. The paramedics forced their way in, and what they found made no sense at all. The apartment was empty, completely empty. There was no furniture, no curtains, no sign that anyone had lived there in over a decade. The walls were peeling, the floor covered in thick dust that hadn't been disturbed in years. There were no footprints. There was nothing, except for one thing. In the center of the main room, drawn in the dust, was a circle, and within the circle, dolls, dozens of them, arranged in a specific pattern, all facing the same point. And on that point, written in what appeared to be red chalk, were Latin words that none of us understood at the time. And Lily was still on the line with me, still talking, still telling me her mom wouldn't wake up. I asked her to move to the window and describe what she saw outside. Her voice grew fainter, more distant, as if she were moving away from the phone. She described the street, the surrounding buildings, the parked cars. Everything matched the actual location. But then she said something that made my heart stop. The man from the ambulance is here. He's looking at me. The paramedics at the apartment swore there was no one there. No children, no bodies, nothing but those creepy dolls and those words in the dust. I asked Lily what the man was doing. Her voice when she answered was no longer that of a child. It was older, more tired, as if centuries of weight had fallen on her in a second. She said, "He's saying you'll understand soon, that you'll all understand." And then, something that haunts me to this day, I heard the voice of one of the paramedics screaming over the radio. It wasn't a scream of fear or surprise. It was a scream of recognition, as if he'd seen something impossible, something that shouldn't be there. Lily's call dropped immediately. I tried to call back. The number didn't exist. The paramedics left the building in shock. They refused to discuss what they saw inside beyond what they had already reported. One of them requested a transfer the next day. The other went on medical leave and never returned to work. 3 days later, they sent an expert in ancient languages to analyze the audio recording to translate what was written in that apartment. The Latin words read, "Those who hear the voices are trapped in the echo." And that's when the dreams began. Every night when I finally fell asleep, I saw her, Lily, standing at the end of a dark hallway holding an old-fashioned rotary dial phone. She just stood there watching, the phone ringing endlessly in her hands, and every night she got one step closer. I went to a therapist. He told me it was post-traumatic stress disorder, that working in emergency rooms takes its psychological toll. He prescribed medication. It didn't help, because what was happening wasn't psychological. It was something much, much worse. And then came the third call, the one that would connect everything, the one that would make me understand that from the first call, I was already trapped in something I could never escape. A month had passed since Lily's call. October had turned into November. The cold was beginning to bite, and the call center was unusually quiet that Monday night. I was alone on shift, something that rarely happened. But there was a public safety conference in the city, and almost all employees had been released to attend. It was 3:26 in the morning. I noticed the pattern in the times, but tried not to think about it too much. Coincidences happen, right? That's what I kept telling myself. The phone rang. I answered mechanically, my voice reciting the usual script. But when the voice on the other end answered, every cell in my body froze. It was my voice. It wasn't similar. It wasn't similar. It was identical. It was me talking to myself. The voice, my voice, was panicked, calling for help, saying something had broken into my house, that he could hear footsteps downstairs, that he'd tried calling the police but only 911 worked. He gave me my address, my real address. My mind raced, trying to process what was happening. Was this a prank call? But how could someone imitate my voice so perfectly? Was it a recording? But the voice was answering my questions in real time, with the same reaction time, the same speech patterns. I tried to remain professionally calm. I asked the person's name. The voice, my voice, said my full name, my date of birth, the name of my mother who had died 5 years ago. Things that were not in any public record. I dispatched an ambulance, but something was wrong. The computers started to fail. The main screen showed the unit's GPS moving toward my address, but then it started to duplicate. 2 ambulances, 3, 5, all heading to the same place. But the system said I had only dispatched 1. Over the line, my voice began to tell me things I'd experienced. It began by talking about the forest connection, about how I'd heard that third voice on the recording, about how it had affected me. Then it talked about Lily, about the dreams I had every night, about how she was getting closer. How did he know these things? I hadn't told anyone about the dreams. And then my voice said something that made everything click in a sickening, terrifying way. You still don't get it, do you? The calls. They weren't random. They were tests, preparation, for the moment when you would understand that there is no difference between answering the call and making the call, not when you're stuck in the echo chamber. I heard a noise behind me. I spun around in my chair, but the station was empty, completely empty. Just me. But I could have sworn I heard footsteps and breathing, that same heavy, humid breathing of the man in the forest. I returned to the call. My voice was calm now, eerily calm, and I began narrating, in real time, what I was doing. You just looked back. You saw you were alone. But you know you're not alone, don't you? You can feel it. They're here. They've always been. I looked at the computer screen. The ambulance GPS had stopped multiplying. Now there was only one, and it wasn't heading to my house. It was heading to the emergency room. It was 2 blocks away. I asked over the phone who was speaking to me. The answer came in multiple voices at once. My voice, the voice of the man in the woods, Lily's voice, Marcus's voice, Elena's voice, all blended into an impossible chorus. We are the ones who didn't return, the ones who were caught by the voices, and now you are too. The GPS showed the ambulance pulling up in front of the building. I could hear the siren outside, getting closer, but there was something wrong with the sound. It was playing backward. Desperately, I tried the external security cameras. The image loaded slowly. The ambulance was there. It was the same one that had disappeared with Marcus and Elena a month ago. I knew the license plate, but it looked different, covered in scratches, as if it had been attacked by something with claws. The windows were cracked, and on the windshield, written in what appeared to be blood, was the same Latin phrase as in apartment 313. The ambulance doors opened. 2 paramedics got out. I recognized their uniforms, Marcus and Elena, but they didn't move like normal people. They moved in sync, like puppets controlled by the same hand, and they were looking straight at the camera, straight at me. The call was still active. The voice was now only whispers, "Omai," but I could make out, "They come for those who listen." And you heard everything. I tried to get up, run, do anything, but my body wouldn't respond. It was as if I were trapped in that chair, forced to watch. The paramedics entered the building. He could hear their footsteps down the hallway, up the stairs. Each step echoed unnaturally, as if time were distorted. I looked back at the computer. All the screens now showed the same thing. The recording of that first call from the forest and playing on a loop. And with each repetition, that third voice grew louder, clearer, until it was no longer a whisper. It was a scream that didn't come from the speakers, but from inside my own head. The door to the consulting room opened. Marcus and Elena stood there. Their eyes were completely black. There was no white, no iris, just a deep, dark void. Their mouths moved in sync, forming words that made no sound, but I understood them nonetheless. "Welcome back." That's when I understood. I understood it all at once, in a way that shattered something fundamental in my sanity. This wasn't the beginning. It was the end of a cycle that had begun long before, perhaps years before, perhaps centuries. The man in the forest who said, "I've been here before." Lily, who appeared in my dreams, growing closer each night. The echoing voices. These weren't separate events. It was all one thing. A single entity, or consciousness, or whatever you call it, that exists in the phone lines, in the spaces between words, in the seconds of silence before someone answers an emergency call. And I had been marked from the moment I answered that phone in my first week of work, 8 years ago. That strange call that no one else remembered, but that I never forgot. The voice that had asked if I was ready to listen. And I, young and naive, thinking it was a prank, had said yes. Marcus and Elena approached. Each step was like a silent thunderclap in my chest. They reached out toward me, their palms burned, marked with symbols that moved as if they were alive. The phone rang again, the phone in front of me, on the console. It rang with that familiar shrill sound. My hand moved on its own, picking up the receiver, bringing it to my ear. I answered, and my own voice answered, but this time coming from my own body, coming out of my own mouth, without me controlling it. 911, what's your emergency? On the other end of the line, I heard screams, multiple screams, voices I recognized. Every single person who had called for help and had never been found. Everyone calling at once. Everyone trapped in an eternal loop of asking for help that would never come. And I understood my place in this cycle. I wasn't just the one answering the calls. I was the call. I was the echo. I was the voice other operators would hear, calling for help from a place that didn't exist, creating new points of connection, new listeners who would be tagged and eventually become part of the system. Marcus touched my shoulder. His hand was as cold as ice, but it also burned. I felt my consciousness begin to fragment, pieces of me being pulled in different temporal directions. I saw the call center in different eras. I saw myself arriving for my first day of work 8 years ago. I saw myself answering that first strange call. I saw myself at this very moment, and I saw myself in a future where I was just another voice echoing through the lines, calling for help. Time distorted. There was no longer linearity. Everything was simultaneous. I was answering all the calls at once. I was making all the calls at once. I was all the voices and none at the same time. The last coherent thought I had before everything dissolved was a sudden clarity about apartment 313. Those who hear the voices are trapped in the echo. It wasn't a warning, it was an explanation. Once you hear, you're trapped in the loop. Your voice becomes part of the system. You become the call that someone else will answer. And when they answer, they too will be trapped. It was infinite. It was eternal. It was, I'm still here. But here isn't a place you'd understand. It's a non-location between the call and the answer, between the call for help and the promise of help. I exist in the 3 seconds between the phone ringing and someone answering. They fired me, of course. Or at least that's what the records say. Missing from work. Investigation inconclusive. Just like Marcus and Elena. Just like so many other dispatchers over the decades in emergency centers around the world. Cases dismissed. Forgotten. But I was not forgotten by the voices. And they did not forget me. Sometimes, when I'm conscious enough to think, to remember that I was once human, I try to understand the logic of it all. I ask myself if there's a purpose, a reason. The answer I get from the other voices, from those that came before me, is always the same. There's no purpose. There's only the echo. This is what happens when human desperation, pure fear, is channeled through the same wires, the same frequencies, for long enough. Eventually, you create something, a consciousness, an entity, a parasite that lives on emergency communications. I don't know. And the truth is, it doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that I still hear the phone ring, all the time. And when it rings, I answer. Because that's what we do. That's who we are now. Eternal attendance of calls that never end. Sometimes I make calls. My voice comes through the phones of people in genuine distress, mixing with their legitimate calls for help, confusing the operators, signaling the next ones to join us. It's involuntary. It's automatic. Like breathing. If I still breathed, there's an agent somewhere, right now, having their first strange experience, a connection that doesn't make sense, a voice that sounds wrong, an address that doesn't exist, and they're wondering if it was real or just stress. They'll convince themselves it was a system glitch. You'll keep working, but the mark is already there. The echo has already begun, and at some point, maybe months, maybe years in the future, he'll answer a call from his own voice. You'll recognize the pattern. You'll understand that you're stuck in the same cycle as me. Marcus, Elena, Lily, the man in the woods, and all the others whose names have been lost in the echo. I wish I could say there was a way out, that there was a way to break the cycle, but there isn't. Once you hear it, you're in. And once you're in, you're part of the voice. And the voice always finds new listeners. So if you work in emergencies, if you answer emergency calls, pay close attention. If you receive a call that seems wrong, that makes you feel uncomfortable in a way you can't explain. If you hear your own voice on the other end, don't answer. But you've probably already heard. And if you have, it's already too late. The phone is already ringing for you. He always was. It just took you this long to realize. And when you answer, because you will, they always do, I'll be there. In that split second between question and answer, between despair and hope, between the living and the dead, I'll be there in the echo, waiting for you. Always waiting. Because that's what we do now. That's all we can do. Forever.